Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something really common, often quite frustrating, that happens later in life. It's how that simple rhythm, day and night, can just completely fall apart. We've probably all seen it, or maybe even experienced it ourselves or with family. Our sources today kind of frame this using an example. Let's call him Mr. Lawson. Picture this. He was always consistent, right? Up super early, read the paper, very steady guy. But lately, he's napping for hours in the afternoon. And now suddenly, he's pacing the hall at 2 a.m., wide awake, says he's just not tired, even though, come breakfast time, he's clearly exhausted, irritable, unsteady. That whole pattern wiped out all day, but then wired at night, that's what we need to unpack. It feels like it's got to be deeper than just, insomnia.
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly our mission for this deep dive. We want to move past just labeling it insomnia and really analyze this as what it is, a significant behavioral rhythm disruption, biologically driven. Our sources take us right into the core mechanisms behind this inconsistency. And importantly, they point towards practical, non-medical ways to use routine environment to try and get that balance back.
Yeah, and it's crucial to understand right off the bat this kind of disruption. It creates this loop, this cycle of exhaustion, confusion. It really chips away at quality of life, not just for the person, but for everyone around them too. And the body kind of loses its sense of time, its predictability, it loses stability. So understanding why the body's struggling with time, that's really step one for any meaningful support.
Okay, let's unpack that root cause then. If the body's basically losing track of whether it's daytime or nighttime, what's actually happening physically in the brain? What makes that internal clock so fragile as we age? Well, it really comes down to the brain's master clock, the 24-hour circadian rhythm. As we get older, that internal rhythm, which is tied to things like light, hormones, activity, it just becomes less robust. It's harder for it to stay synchronized. Think of it like the body's metronome. You used to tick along reliably, right?
Okay.
But now it starts to maybe slow down or speed up erratically, skip beats almost. It loses its steady beat.
Right, like the conductor of the orchestra is getting confused. So what are the specific things that are pushing it out of sync? What contributes to that misalignment getting worse?
Our sources point to four main factors that really accelerate this breakdown. The first one is maybe the simplest, just reduced exposure to natural light. If you're spending less time outside or even just sitting further away from windows indoors, your brain just isn't getting that strong, clear signal of morning light. And that light is essential for setting the clock, signaling time to be awake.
Okay, less light. Makes sense. What's next?
Second, there are unavoidable hormonal shifts. Some 2022 research we looked at really highlighted significant age-related drops in the body's natural melatonin production. Melatonin, that's the chemical signal that tells the body time for rest. If that signal gets weaker, the drive to sleep diminishes, even if the body itself is physically tired.
Wow, okay. So the main external cue, light, is weaker, and the internal chemical cue for sleep, melatonin, is also fading. That's a double whammy right there.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the third factor is often medication timing. Many common necessary medications can, sometimes inadvertently, throw off sleep cycles. Depending on when they're taken, morning or evening, they might have stimulating effects or sedating effects that just interfere with the body's natural attempts to have a smooth transition between wake and sleep.
Mm-hmm. And that fourth one, reduced daily activity, I think people often overlook that. You see someone tired, the instinct is, oh, let them rest more, but that sounds like it could actually backfire for regulating the clock.
It does seem counterintuitive, doesn't it? But it's vital. If the body doesn't expend enough energy, physical or even mental energy, during the day, it doesn't build up enough of what we call sleep pressure or sleep debt. Basically, it hasn't earned its rest. Reduced activity means you don't really achieve that deep level of fatigue needed for solid sleep at night.
So when you get that collision, poor light cues, lower melatonin, maybe meds interfering, and not enough daytime activity, what does that do to the actual quality of the sleep they do manage to get? The sources mentioned changes in sleep architecture.
Right, that's a crucial technical point, so let's just quickly define that. Sleep architecture basically means the structure of your night's sleep, the pattern of how you cycle through the different stages: light sleep, deep restorative sleep, REM sleep. As we age, and especially with these disruptions, that architecture itself gets weaker, less stable. Older adults tend to have shorter sleep cycles overall. They wake up much more frequently during the night. Sometimes they don't even remember it happening. And the sleep they do get tends to be lighter, more fragmented. They spend a lot less time in that really deep, slow-wave sleep phase. That's the phase that truly restores energy and helps consolidate memories.
Ah, okay. So they might be sleeping for, say, 7 hours, but they're not actually recovering during that time. And that, I guess, feeds right back into the disruptive behavior we started with, like Mr. Lawson pacing at 2 a.m.
Precisely. It connects right back. This lack of restorative sleep means they wake up feeling unrefreshed, tired. That fatigue can lead to more irregular behavior during the day, maybe long naps, agitation, irritability. And that irregular daytime schedule then confuses the body's signals even more. The lines between day and night just completely blur. It becomes a vicious cycle.
Right. Okay. So if that's the mechanism, the big question becomes how we, or, a caregiver, should interpret the behavior that results from that. Let's shift to that because it feels like the biggest perspective change needed. Seeing someone pacing or wandering in the middle of the night, it just looks chaotic, maybe even defiant. But the sources seem to reframe that quite powerfully.
They really do. They offer this fundamental insight.
Yeah.
That disruptive nighttime behavior, it's actually a signal, it's communication. It's telling us the environment and the body clock are seriously out of sync. It's not defiance. So when an older adult is pacing or wandering and be talking through the night, these actions are almost never just random attempts to be difficult or annoying. The sources define them as attempts at self-regulation. That movement, that pacing that seems so aimless, it's often the body trying desperately to burn off built-up anxiety or confusion, or maybe excess energy and stress hormones like cortisol that should have been processed and dissipated during deep, restful sleep hours earlier.
Huh. I never really thought of it that way, that the body's trying to regulate its own internal chaos, not create chaos for others.
Yeah.
It's like the brain saying, look, I didn't get my deep rest. I've got all this unprocessed stuff, this energy, got to move. That completely changes how you respond, doesn't it?
It changes everything. The whole dynamic shifts. Instead of seeing someone as being difficult, you start to see them as genuinely uncomfortable, maybe distressed, and actively seeking some kind of balance, however clumsily. That feeling they might express, I'm just not tired, even when they look exhausted. That's likely the body clock just failing to send the right sleep signal at the right time.
Okay, so if the behavior is an attempt at self-regulation, then the goal isn't just to make them stop pacing immediately. The sources seem to stress that the real goal is to redirect that energy, right? Redirect it towards restoring the rhythm by creating those consistent, reliable cues, light activity routine that the brain can actually recognize and latch onto for awake time and rest time.
Exactly. And this directly addresses that common frustration, the point from the Q&A section in our source material. Why do they sleep all day but then stay awake all night? Again, the simplest answer is often that napping too long or too late in the day, especially those deep afternoon naps, essentially uses up whatever remaining sleep drive they had. It tells the brain the big sleep already happened, confusing the system entirely for the nighttime.
But isn't it hard to tell someone who looks exhausted, actually, you need more activity during the day? How do the sources suggest balancing that need for rest with the need for, rhythmic activity?
They emphasize that the activity should be gentle, purposeful, not necessarily strenuous exercise. It's more about creating sufficient contrast between day and night. Sufficient wakefulness during the day helps earn the rest at night. If you allow or even encourage long, deep naps late in the afternoon, you're effectively signaling to the brain that the main rest period is happening at, say, 4 p.m. That pretty much guarantees more wakefulness later that night.
That makes so much sense. Okay, this flows perfectly into the solutions then, the really practical side of this deep dive, especially given the risks we know come with sleep medications for older adults, like increased confusion. Maybe these behavioral strategies really seem like the safest and maybe most effective first approach.
They really are the foundation. Our sources, including those findings from Frontiers in Behavioral Neuroscience back in 2022, they strongly emphasize that these behavioral interventions, consistent routines, managing the environment, using light properly, are the key non-medical way forward for restoring that sleep-wake cycle. The core message is pretty straightforward. Habits heal rhythm.
Okay, let's spend some time on these 6 key support strategies that sources detail, because it sounds like it's not just one magic bullet, but more like a coordinated effort, right? A bundle of consistent cues.
Exactly. We can group them a bit to make them easier to think about. First up, let's talk about rhythm and consistency. This is about establishing a predictable but gentle daily structure.
So what does that actually look like day to day? Are we talking about a super rigid minute-by-minute schedule? That sounds stressful in itself.
No, you're right. Rigidity can definitely create anxiety. It's more about predictability. Things like meals, maybe bathing, a short walk, quiet time for reading or listening to music, aiming for these to happen at roughly similar times each day. That consistency is how you start to essentially reteach the body clock when to expect activity and, crucially, when to expect the wind-down period. It provides this sort of gentle scaffolding for the day.
Okay, scaffolding, not a cage. I like that. What's next? You mentioned light earlier being critical.
Yes, second, and maybe the most powerful tool we have is using light as a cue. Since we know light is the body's primary clock setter, we absolutely have to manage it intentionally.
How do you apply that practically? Especially if someone spends most of their time indoors.
Well, you encourage bright light exposure, especially natural sunlight if possible, first thing in the morning. Even just sitting by a bright window for 15–20 minutes while having coffee can make a huge difference. It shouts daytime to the brain. And then, just as importantly, the opposite in the evening. Lights need to start dimming gradually, maybe an hour or two before the desired bedtime, to signal, okay, time to wind down. We need a really clear difference between bright day and soft evening. And a key part of that evening dimming is limiting blue light from screens, TVs, phones, tablets, as that specific wavelength is incredibly powerful at telling the brain it's still daytime.
Right, that gradual dimming seems key. You can't just flip a switch and expect the brain to calm down instantly if it's been bathed in bright light, which kind of leads into the third point, reducing stimulation later in the day.
Exactly. This means avoiding the obvious things like caffeine, maybe large amounts of sugar or alcohol, particularly after mid-afternoon, because they artificially boost alertness. But the sources also flag something maybe less obvious. Avoiding really high-energy, fast-paced TV shows. Think action movies, maybe intense news programs late in the evening. They can flood the brain with stimulating content right when it should be shifting gears towards calm.
That makes a lot of sense. We usually focus on physical stimulation, but that cognitive or emotional stimulation can be just as potent in keeping the awake signal switched on. Okay, so we've got rhythm, light, stimulation. What about the actual bedroom, the sleep environment itself?
Yeah, the bedroom needs to send a very clear message. This place is for rest. So focus on comfort, soft bedding, maybe warmer, neutral colors, definitely minimal clutter. Clutter can feel subtly agitating. And here's a really specific, actionable detail from the sources. Get rid of bright, glowing digital alarm clocks. Or cover up those little blue or red lights on chargers and electronics. Even those small points of light can confuse the brain's light sensors during the night, subtly disrupting that natural transition into and maintenance of sleep.
That's a fantastic point. Such an easy fix that probably gets missed all the time. Okay, two more strategies. These seem focused on the interaction around bedtime or during the night. Number 5 is positive reinforcement. How does that work?
This one's subtle but can be quite powerful. If you notice the person settling more easily, or that they seem to have had a calmer night, you acknowledge it the next morning, gently, specifically. Simple phrases like, "You seem to rest so well last night," or "You look much calmer this morning," can help associate that quiet, restful state with positive feedback. It subtly reinforces calm behavior as rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Associating calmness with something positive. Okay, and finally, the big one. What do you actually do when the restlessness hits? When Mr. Lawson is pacing at 2 a.m., the strategy is nighttime redirection.
Right, first things first. Safety. Ensure the pathways are clear of clutter. Maybe use very low-level soft night lights so they can move safely if they need to. And the sources are incredibly clear on this. Never shame, scold, or try to physically restrain someone who's pacing or restless. That only ramps up anxiety and distress, making things worse. Instead, the approach is gentle redirection with comfort. You acknowledge their state without arguing about it. You might say something calm, like, "It seems like you have a lot of energy right now. How about we sit here together for a bit with this warm blanket? It's still nighttime. Let's rest for a while." The goal is safety and comfort, gently guiding them back towards a state of calm, validating their feeling while redirecting the behavior.
That approach feels so much more humane and probably more effective, too. This all circles back nicely to that warning our sources included about medication, doesn't it? While megs might seem like a quick fix, they often come with significant downsides, like increased confusion, daytime grogginess, or, really seriously, a higher risk of falls. It makes these behavioral changes seem like the much safer and often more effective place to start.
Absolutely. Focusing on the environment, the routine, the light, these things give the brain the actual tools it needs to begin self-regulating again. It's a path towards sustainable, long-term restoration that medication alone just can't provide.
Okay, so let's try and bring all this insight together. We started with that really frustrating, almost chaotic seeming pattern of being tired but wired. What's the single most important message you think our listeners should take away from this deep dive?
I think the central message is that this restlessness, this nighttime wakefulness, it isn't truly chaotic. It's the body's own innate, maybe clumsy but understandable attempt to find balance when its sense of time has gone adrift. So the role of the caregiver, or even if you're navigating this yourself, needs to shift away from trying to control the behavior and towards observing the patterns, understanding the why, and then systematically adjusting the environment and the daily rhythm. Every gentle correction in routine, every consistent light cue, every quiet moment of redirection, it's a small but significant victory in helping restore that sense of peace and predictability.
It really reframes the whole interaction, doesn't it? It's not a battle over sleep anymore. It becomes more like a collaborative project to help the brain find its rhythm again. You're not fighting the person, you're supporting their internal clock.
Exactly. And that, I think, leads to the deepest lesson from these sources, the final thought we wanted to leave you with today. Sometimes real peace and restfulness return not by focusing solely on the often impossible feeling task of forcing sleep when the body isn't ready. Instead, that peace often comes back through that gentle, patient, consistent behavioral guidance, hour by hour, day by day. It's about constantly calmly reminding the body what time it is, signaling safety, signaling the appropriateness of rest. That consistent supportive guidance, that is the real practical application of understanding these rhythms.